It's Valentine's Day, so it's a good time to ask, what do women want? Flowers? A cute bear? Chocolate? Well, as we all know, what women really want is to avoid neurodegenerative diseases. Why do women want this specifically? Well, 2/3 of Alzheimer cases in the US are women. Now you might think, well, women live longer and the risk of Alzheimer's increases with age, so yeah, duh. But that's not the full story, because it turns out women just have more biological risk factors. But, you might say, the woman in my life, who may or may not be myself, is not old. Why should I be thinking about neurodegenerative diseases on this, the day of love? Well, these diseases actually start decades before observable symptoms, as early as one's early 30s. And the best way to address increased risk factors is to address them as soon as possible. If you want your love to be eternal, or at least as close as is currently biologically possible, then it's in your interest to support the brains that facilitate this love. So let's blaze through a quick understanding of these diseases, what you can do, and what the perfect brain-healthy Valentine's Day date might look like. Brains decline as we age, and that's normal. The fatty coating that insulates brain cells begins to deteriorate. And this slows down how quickly we can think, the amount of information we can absorb, and what we learn and remember. And that's too bad. But the good news is that this normal loss is basically linear. Neurodegenerative diseases, on the other hand, accelerate the loss of brain size and function. They have other symptoms like loss of short-term memory, changes in personality, eventually delusions and paranoia in the case of Alzheimer's, or tremors, stiffness, and loss of motor function in the case of Parkinson's. You have the potential to live a long, healthy life with normal cognitive decline, but these diseases will cut that potential short. The unfortunate part is that the early symptoms of these diseases actually look pretty similar to regular aging. But that means by the time that, for example, Parkinson's is normally diagnosed, 60 to 80% of the dopamine cells that get attacked are already gone. We can't currently bring back brain function, we can only prevent further loss. So it's important to start now because, regardless of your biological gender, Alzheimer's kills more people than prostate and breast cancer combined. So what can we do to prevent it? Both Alzheimer's and Parkinson's involve the buildup of toxic proteins in the brain, but a lot of factors affect this buildup. The way that risks interact is complex, and there are some that you can affect and some you can't. For example, there is a gene that increases the risk of Alzheimer's called APOE4. It's a cholesterol gene, and cholesterol is really important for brain function. People with this gene have an impaired ability to move cholesterol between cells, which leads to buildup and eventually cell death. Chris Hemsworth actually has 2 copies. Obviously, having this gene is not something that you can control, but if you know you have this gene, you can pay attention to your cholesterol a lot sooner, and lean towards healthy fats earlier in life to lessen its impact. What's interesting is that since these risks are multifactorial, coming from a variety of factors, the Lancet Commission in 2024 showed that 45% of dementia cases, dementia being the umbrella of both Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, could be prevented by addressing 14 modifiable risk factors. In early life, education, midlife, hearing loss, high LDL cholesterol, depression, traumatic brain injury, physical inactivity, diabetes, smoking, hypertension, obesity, excessive alcohol, and late in life, social isolation, air pollution, and vision loss. Let's put a pin in education, because when I first saw it, I was like, huh? Okay, so this is all good to know, but why bring up women? Well, for one, the risk of the APOE4 gene is doubled for women. And stress, high cholesterol and heart disease, insulin resistance and diabetes, and high blood pressure all impact women's brains more significantly than men's. But even worse, women get an entirely extra category of risk: hormones and menopause. What is menopause? Well, for one, it's a sexy topic for a Valentine's themed video. It's when your body decides it's done having kids, and so it decides to just sort of shut that whole reproductive system off. But slowly and kind of badly. You stop getting your period, and you can't get pregnant. Now, you might think of menopause affecting women in their late 40s and early 50s, but the transition actually starts 7+ years earlier, in a state called perimenopause. Perimenopause can start as early as your early 30s, and basically causes a steep decline in the production of female sex hormones, particularly estrogen. This has a pretty major impact on the brain. It affects how it utilizes energy and its resilience to neurodegeneration, or neuroplasticity. Put a pin in neuroplasticity too. Estrogen is actually neuroprotective. The good news is that if you don't make hormones yourself, you can take them. Hormone replacement therapy, in this critical window of when women stop producing them, can be protective. Now, there was some controversy about hormone replacement therapy in women potentially causing breast cancer in some older, potentially flawed studies. But newer research is coming out that supports its use, and it is now generally supported. So, neurodegenerative diseases, bad. Addressing them, good. But I'm gonna add a whole new wrinkle to all of this, with a mystery. A 95-year-old woman dies, and an autopsy is performed of her brain. The autopsy shows clinical signs of both Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, but she never had any observable symptoms of either. How is that possible? Let's take out our neuroplasticity pin. Neuroplasticity is what allows our brains to function around and sort of bypass some of these physical issues. Our brains are very adaptable, but they are also very use it or lose it. We have both cognitive and motor reserves. You can think of them as insurance against cognitive decline. Cognitive reserves can allow us to maintain cognitive function and cope with damage from head injury, age, or disease. You can build your cognitive reserve and plasticity by creating new pathways and staying stimulated. You can maintain social connections, do activities with cognitive engagement, like reading, playing musical instruments, and learning foreign languages. Also, protecting your vision and hearing are important to keep varied signals coming in for your brain to process and to increase your engagement with the world. And now is when we pull out our pin for education as a risk. A low level of education seems like a pretty weird risk compared to, like, traumatic brain injuries and excessive alcohol use. But what it really comes down to is what you spend your time doing all day at your job. If your education only allows you to do rote, repeatable tasks, that isn't going to be as good for your brain as a job that forces you to do critical thinking, problem solving. This also isn't arguably something that's like easy to control, but finding ways outside of work to be creative and to give you something to think about while you're working can be really useful. So there's a cognitive reserve, but there's also the motor reserve. And it's sort of similar in the sense that it's use it or lose it. So, for example, if you don't practice moving each of your toes, you'll actually kind of lose that ability. And that might sound kind of stupid, except that when you get older, not being able to move your toes properly can actually increase your risk of falling. Now, obviously exercise is good, but it's easy to kind of fall into a rut and just do the same run or the same exercises in the gym every day. But it's actually important to change the way you use your body. Your brain needs novelty to force it to adapt and grow. And different activities have different benefits. Now, your Valentine's date is approaching, but here are 3 more quick things to keep your brain healthy. Nutrition. Eat healthy fats. Now, you've probably heard this before, but now you have a better understanding of how cholesterol can affect your brain. Sleep. Sleep's actually pretty important. Remember how I said these diseases are caused by the buildup of toxic proteins? Well, when you sleep, the fluid-filled spaces in your brain actually expand and allow you to wash away the waste products. Sleep allows you to clean out these toxic proteins. This study found that the accumulation of the Alzheimer's toxic protein, amyloid, increases by 5% in healthy people after just 1 night of sleep deprivation. But getting several nights of good sleep flushes these proteins and lowers it back down. If you aren't sleeping well, and you know why, it's pretty important to try to address it. If you're not sleeping well and you don't know why, it's also really important to figure it out. For example, I realized that I'm actually super susceptible to the caffeine in chocolate, like way more than other people. Like, if I have a piece of chocolate after around 5 p.m., it actually will affect my ability to fall asleep. And that's true for me, but something else might be true for you, so it's worth figuring out. And finally, stress. Have you considered just not being stressed? Haha, cool. But one thing I didn't realize is that the brain treats external triggers for stress and internal triggers for stress the same way. So if you are struggling with anxiety and you don't have a clear external trigger, it's still really important to try to get help to manage it. Great, so now it's time for the ideal brain health supporting Valentine's Day date. What women want. Start the date by giving the woman a nice card with a list of nearby endocrinologists or certified menopause practitioners, along with instructions of how to join their waitlists and filtered by ones that actually take her insurance. A true act of service. And it's never too soon, because even if the woman in your life is like 26, I guarantee she won't get off the waitlist until she's like 36. Assuming she's into that kind of thing, of course. Then go out for Mediterranean food to pack in some omega-3s and hummus. While you're eating dinner, only speak in the new conlang you created to improve your cognitive reserve. Go to a concert, but be sure to bring earplugs to protect your hearing. Do lots of weird and unpredictable dance moves to improve your motor reserve. Finally, leave the concert at a reasonable hour so you still have time for activities, and can both go to bed early and get a good, restful night of sleep. At least, that's what I would want. Except, well, actually, I would swap Mediterranean food with sushi. Maybe considering women as a collective here is not useful.